Have you ever seen the most shameless woman in the world? A middle-aged man accidentally passed away and received a compensation of 600,000 yuan. His ex-wife, whom he had been divorced from for 7 years, immediately went to his house to claim a share of the money. Moreover, she threatened to sue her former in-laws and even demanded the exhumation of her ex-husband's body for a DNA test. It all started a month earlier. Zheng Yuanping, 32 years old, died in an accident while working at a construction site. The contractor paid 600,000 yuan to the family as funeral compensation. Zheng's elderly parents, their hair white with age, were devastated by the loss of their youngest son. However, at that moment, Zheng, Zheng's ex-wife, who had not appeared for 7 years, suddenly showed up. She didn't come alone. She brought her son, Tong, who was also her former in-law's grandchild, and threatened the elderly couple. If they didn't pay her 500,000 yuan in child support, she would leave their grandson homeless. Thinking that, out of love for their grandson, the elderly couple would give in to Zheng's demands, she was shocked when they firmly refused. What's more, the grandparents publicly declared that even if the child starved, they wouldn't help because the child had no biological connection to them. This statement shocked everyone, but Zheng accused her in-laws of lying just to keep the compensation money and ruin her reputation. To resolve the situation, Zheng called a TV crew to expose the injustice, hoping the journalists would help her get the child support she believed was hers. She wanted to reveal the ugly truth about her former in-laws. When Zheng and the journalists arrived at the Zheng's house, they found Zheng's mother crying inconsolably. The pain of losing a young son is something no one can truly understand. The journalists asked Zheng's mother if she was really trying to keep the compensation money and if she had made up lies about Zheng. Zheng's mother, crying, hesitated before finally confessing to the reporter that Tong was not her biological grandson. To prove her claim, Zheng's mother showed a DNA test report confirming that Tong was not Zheng Yuanping's son. However, Zheng insisted that the report was fake and that her former in-laws were trying to keep the money. The argument escalated, and Zheng went as far as demanding her ex-husband's body be exhumed to prove her innocence. She even made a solemn vow at her ex-husband's grave, declaring that if Tong was not his son, she and the child would jump from a building to prove their innocence.
千锤万手出深山，烈火焚烧落藤间。粉骨碎尸全不怕，要留清白在人间，要把我和妈妈的清白留在人间。
With the situation at a standstill, local officials suggested conducting a new DNA test at a different institution. They went to a testing center, where it was explained that even though the father had passed away, it was still possible to determine the biological relationship between the child and his paternal grandparents. This type of test is legally valid. Under the journalist's supervision, blood samples were collected for testing. During the process, a frightened Tong clung to his grandfather's lap, seeking comfort. More than anyone else, the grandfather hoped the first test had been wrong. The DNA results would take a week to be ready. Meanwhile, Zheng's parents shared the backstory with the journalists. Zheng Yuanping and Zheng met through an arranged marriage. 7 months after their engagement, Zheng gave birth to a son. As the only heir of the Zheng family, Tong was deeply loved. The child's birth brought joy, but also placed a heavy financial burden on Zheng Yuanping, who worked tirelessly to support his family. Zheng stayed home to care for the child, but her excessive spending placed even more pressure on Zheng Yuanping. Even with his parents helping with the little they earned by collecting recyclables, their financial situation was unsustainable. When Tong was 3 years old, Zheng Yuanping couldn't take it anymore and divorced Zheng. Tong remained in his mother's custody, and she took him to live with her own parents. 3 months after the divorce, Zheng married another man, while Zheng Yuanping never remarried. He chose to work far from home, perhaps to escape painful memories, but ultimately died in a work accident. The 600,000 yuan compensation was paid to Zheng's parents. That was when Zheng, after 7 years of divorce, showed up to demand 500,000 yuan for Tong's upbringing. 7 days later, the DNA test results were ready. Zheng and her parents were present in the mediation room to hear the results. However, before the report was even opened, Zheng's father made a surprising decision. He stated that regardless of the results, he was willing to accept Tong Tong as his grandson and raise him. He wanted to ensure that his son had an heir, even if not biologically related. He even offered Jay Li the chance not to open the report and avoid further conflicts, but she insisted on seeing the result. The report confirmed that Tong Tong was not Zheng Yuanping's biological son. A heavy silence filled the room, and Jay Li, who had been so confident, was in shock. Zheng's father, having expected this outcome, walked out of the room, while Zheng's mother broke down in tears. The truth was out, and there was no turning back. Jay Li's father was furious at his daughter for bringing shame to the family. He even told Jay Li that she should die to redeem herself. However, the next day, Jay Li shocked everyone once again. She decided to send Tong Tong back to his paternal grandparents, reminding them that they had promised to raise him regardless of the DNA test result. She justified her decision by saying that since the grandparents had promised to take care of the child, they should keep their word. She also stated that if anything happened to Tong Tong under their care, she would not take responsibility. Jay Li took Tong Tong to the Zheng's house and left him at the door, saying, "You said you would raise him. Here's the child." However, Zheng's father refused, saying he had already given Jay Li a chance, and now it was too late. He emphasized that Jay Li had never apologized for her actions. Journalists tried to get Jay Li to admit the truth about Tong Tong's paternity, but she continued insisting that the child was Zheng Yuanping's son. The next day, Jay Li shocked everyone again by taking the journalists to court. She decided to sue her former in-laws, demanding they pay child support for Tong Tong. She argued that even if Tong Tong was not Zheng Yuanping's biological son, she still had a right to part of the compensation money. No one could understand how Jay Li could be so shameless. But in the end, everyone seemed to forget the innocent child, whose dignity had been repeatedly trampled by his own mother. In this story, what really saddens me the most is the poor child. I don't know what his future will be like, but now, I'd love to hear your opinion in the comments. What do you think about this dilemma? If you like this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.